an opportunity for Bill Shorten to actually grab hold of the Keating-Hawke legacy in terms of economic reform. You know, they were a government that sold off government assets that needed to be sold.
Yeah.
You know, there was no justification to remain in government hands, in taxpayer hands. Let's remind ourselves. This was legislation that was passed in late 2006. The Labor government could have picked it up. They could have carried on with the Hawke-Keating legacy. They didn't, and they're still not doing that. And I think these kinds of things are the biggest sign, really, that Bill Shorten is so often on the wrong side of debates here. You know, even as the former chairman of Medibank Private said last year, there's just no justification anymore in such a competitive market to have a government-owned institution.
But Janet, I know it's a big question. We could fill a week of shows with answering it. But do you believe in Australia we have free speech, or real free speech, or however I'm trying to couch this argument?
No, we don't. As you said at the beginning of your program, there are so many limits on free speech, and we do, you know, in the last few weeks, of course, we've been talking about the Racial Discrimination Act, but let me talk about that for a moment. I know you want to talk about other areas, but the reason the Racial Discrimination Act has become so totemic within the Liberal Party and places like the Institute of Public Affairs and so on is because about 20 or 30 years ago, feelings started to become the measure of rights, okay? And then they started appearing in laws. Now, how do you measure feelings? It's an incredibly subjective measurement on any score. It's actually impossible to do. It really depends on the judge of the time. So, but I think that has been the biggest retrograde step in terms of free speech and human rights, because the right to free speech has been infected by this notion that I have a right not to have my feelings hurt. You know, that's been the growth of human rights. So the changes to the Racial Discrimination Act are incredibly important, and I know that there's been, you know, a lot of people in the Labor Party have been saying, well, why didn't Andrew Bolt appeal? As if by not appealing he was conceding he did something wrong. No, he was just recognising that the law as it stands means that a judge in Australia in the federal court can say, I don't like the tone of that argument, that article, right? Now, that is the most chilling part of the Racial Discrimination Act, and that clearly needs to be changed. Paul, just before you move on. You know, unfortunately, the debate now, whether it's because it's, you know, involved the Andrew Bolt case or because it's been led by a Conservative government, it's become a real left-right thing, and I think that's incredibly unfortunate. You know, as the great Mark Steyn said, free speech is not a left-right thing, it's a free-unfree thing. It's that simple. And we've moved so far into these sort of polarising points now, you wonder how we're actually going to agree to it. And we do need to agree to it.